Are you someone who gets caught up on this idea of perfectionism and it's impacting on your relationship with yourself, how you feel about yourself, maybe mentally, maybe emotionally, maybe some of all of those things? Well, today I'm going to talk about working through this thing we call perfectionism. And if you stay until the end, I have an extra point for you then as well. As always, if you want to connect with me more on social media, you can find my links in the show notes below. So, I used to be really like in this space of I got to get it perfect. If it wasn't perfect, I'm going to be disappointed in myself, disappointed with the result. I like to look my best, and then I'd even find like little faults in that. I always had to say the right things. I always had to be like super prepared for everything. Now, preparation is good and it builds your confidence certainly, but there can be a point where you're overthinking, and maybe you've been there as well. And I used to be like that in school, imagining like the perfect scenario, and if anything less than that, it would be disappointing. Now, it wasn't to the point where I had to get like 100% on everything, no, but there were certain standards I set for myself. And do you know what I realised? The more I went through my own life, what I heard, what I learned from other people, it doesn't exist. Like, it's absolute BS. Like, people make it up. There is no such thing as perfectionism, right? Because the standard doesn't work, doesn't exist. There's nothing perfect in this world, right? You can find a fault in anything. And actually, Tony Robbins quoted and said, perfectionism is the lowest standard there is. Because again, it doesn't exist. It's worse than bad, right? And I saw someone bring this up on one of the calls I was, and he said, one of my problems is I'm a perfectionist. And I kept quiet. And I realised quite a lot of people talk about this and how ridiculous it is. There's no such thing. Perfectionism is really the fear of not being good enough, of feeling that yourself or someone else, or the fear of someone else suggesting you're not good enough, right? So therefore we're like, we've got to get everything right, got to be certain it's going to work, we got to be like everything's right, and that can't happen, right? There are high standards. Excellence is a high standard, brilliance is a high standard, you know, superb, like there are these high standards, right? But there's no such thing as perfectionism. It's ridiculous. It doesn't exist. It is just the fear of not being good enough, right? And I'm going to talk about how we can work through this today, because I think it's really important how it's helped me. I totally used to be guilty of this though. It used to be like, I've got to get it perfect before I do anything. And it can get you into this overthinking space, this overwhelm. And actually, mentally, it's really damaged me over my time as well, because I just wouldn't get as much done. I'd get exhausted from my thinking. I'd drain myself out. And maybe you can relate to that as well. So here are some points I really want to give you. And I'm not going to give you a perfect list because it doesn't exist. I'm just going to give you some short pointers, because taking messy action has got me so far in my life. The first one, focus on the effort, not on the result. And what do I mean by this? I mean, you've got to have a destination where you're going for with like your goals, right? And it's not about achieving the goals. It's not like if you want to become a millionaire, great goal. It's not about you're going to be happy or feeling amazing when that happens. It's about along the way, what are these mini goals? What's the effort you're putting in? Like you're saving, you aim to save X amount this month, or probably a better approach is going out and making more money than trying to save your money. You know, both are great. But like, okay, you're going to go out and get one new client this week, or you're going to go and research some ideas on how you're going to make more money, right? Go on ChatGPT or something like that, right? Or you want to plan like a social event. Like, it's not about like having this massive party. It's about actually putting the invites out, asking people if they'd be available to come to your party, for example, right? So start focusing more on the effort and celebrating and getting excited by that rather than the outcome. Know where you're going, but get excited by the effort. The second one, write down 3 self-love things you love about yourself each day. I do this every day. I do it twice a day, so it's 6 things technically. But I'll like write down things I loved about what I did in a day or in general, right? Like, I loved the courage I had today, I might write, to face something that was a little bit scary, to have a difficult conversation with someone, to ask a question that was quite difficult. Or I loved the effort I put in the gym, even if I Didn't get like a full bunch of reps out on my final set because I was tired, but that's a good sign because it actually shows I'm progressing rather than getting comfortable. I appreciate me for the effort. Maybe I went for a hard time and yet I still found myself doing some small things. I love that about me. So write what it is for you, no matter how small. Like 3 things a day that you did through the day that you can celebrate and love about yourself. And you're going to be like, oh, it's really hard to love myself. Well, I'll say this. Like, it's a muscle, it's a practice. People are like, oh, I tried to love myself for a day and it didn't work. Yes, because you only did it for a day, right? If you've had a lifetime of attacking yourself, do you think it's going to be cleared up in a day? No. Just commit to this 3 things a day, right? And then the third thing, write down when you failed and when it's turned around, right? So think about when you have failed in your life and actually when it's turned around, right? So it's like, okay, maybe you didn't get a job you wanted, or maybe someone ended a relationship with you, or maybe it's like someone said no to you for whatever it was, professionally or personally, right? And yet you found another opportunity weeks or months later, right? Because that shows that there's always room for progress, right? Even when we think we've not done something. And the more you can train your brain to think in that way, the more evidence it's going to give you and the more basis you're going to have to move forward. I've got a final point for you as well. I want to mention again that if you want to connect me more on social media, you can find my links in the show notes below as well. The final point I want to say is look at examples of other people. We can get inspired by the stories of others, which is what I've done many times. Like sometimes I think, life's a little bit challenging, and then I'll look at like someone who's maybe had a horrific accident, they came back, they're a motivational speaker, maybe someone who was born and not even as fortunate as I've been. And yet they've like created their dream life, right? Or to someone who like maybe lost a load of money, they went broke and then they built it up again. Because what that does is it shows that nobody's perfect. And look at your hero, like find a hero of yourself, a role model, and then start learning more about them. And chances are they've had stories when they've had to bounce back many times. And that actually, when we see this from other people, I found that this inspires us a little bit more. And it also shows that no one's perfect. Again, perfectionism doesn't exist. It's the fear of not being good enough. So if you look out and start looking at people who are your role models or people you admire and start looking at their stories, you can take inspiration from them as well. Just pick up a book and read, or watch a YouTube or listen to a podcast of theirs. So I appreciate you for being here, and remember to leave your heart and not a fear.